Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for making a little space for us in your day to learn about the Decisions platform and specifically process mining. My name is Danny Torbett. I'm the Analyst Relations Manager for Decisions. And basically, I'm the guy that talks to Gartner and Forrester, and I'm also good at webinars. So here I am today with Mark Klein, our product owner of process mining here at Decisions. So happy you could join us. Thanks for making some time. Before we get started, I have a couple of housekeeping items. We're actually in the middle of one of our Submerse events. So Decisions holds 3-day intensive training events all around the world. We're actually holding one at our world headquarters right now in Virginia Beach. But in 2 weeks, we'll be in Stockholm, Sweden. And then July 23rd to the 25th, we'll be in Denver. We bring together our founders, our architects, and our developers and engineers with our prospects and customers and founders. And we talk about really interesting use cases. And we do a lot of training in the platform. We have a foundations class for people that are just getting started, as well as a master's class for people that have been working in the Decisions platform for a while. They're great events, a great way to get to know us. So check us out at decisions.com/events and sign up for one of those. While you're there, go ahead and register for our next webinar. So we've got a big one coming up here at the end of the month with the release of version 9 of Decisions with Project Hub. On Thursday, May the 30th, join the product team for an in-depth exploration of version 9 to discover new features and enhancements to stream project management and achieve design excellence. Then on the 13th, we'll discover how Decisions can cover complex case management processes with these. So register for all of that at decisions.com/events. So for those of you that chimed into chat, you now know that we have a chat feature, and we've got plenty of folks on here from Decisions. Of course, we're going to have Q&A at the end, but don't feel like you have to wait until the end. If if you have an interesting question, just pop it into chat. We'd be happy to answer it for you in live time. Let's go over the agenda really quick. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Decisions, about the platform itself, and about intelligent process automation, how we use automation to combine the power of process mining with process automation. And Mark is going to tell us a little bit about process mining, what it is, how it works, and then show us an example of our process mining capabilities that are part of the Decisions platform. And of course, we'll have some more Q&A at the end. So without further ado, let me go ahead and tell you a little bit about Decisions. Decisions is a low-code application platform. We basically, at our core, we help you build complex software quickly without writing any code. And these are the 5 elements of our platform. The first is an enterprise-class rules engine. Not just simple statement rules, but truth tables, matrix rules, rule chains, rule sets. We have about 8 different types of rules, and the only qualification made to be able to build logic for any enterprise application is the ability to write a natural language sentence or fill out a spreadsheet, because there's no code. It's all visual. The second pillar of the platform is our workflow manager. So if you're familiar with platforms like Visio or Lucidchart, it's a very similar build experience. Windows toolbar up across the top with all the usual suspects, but the real magic is on the left-hand side of our designer studios, where you have a library of over 5,000 custom code steps that a user simply drags and drops onto a canvas to create applications. You link those objects together. It's self-validating, coaching you as you're building these, and you debug them right in the same platform. Today, we're going to focus on process mining. So I'm not even going to bother to describe it to you, because I want you to get it right direct from the expert specialist, because he always hates the way I mangle my description of process mining. So I will defer to the expert here. The fourth element of the platform is our integration layer. So one of the really core use cases of Decisions is process orchestration. And we do that by enabling an open API layer. We also come with over 70 pre-built modules for the most common applications out there. Things like Salesforce, SAP, CRM systems, ERP systems, HRIS systems, all the acronym systems. We give you the ability to tie them together to be able to use data in those applications that cross all of those boundaries. And then finally, we give you an interface designer for you to be able to build custom user interfaces or customer experiences, user experiences through things like dashboards, portals, web pages, reports, things like that. Over to the left-hand side of the screen here, you can see the three main patterns of automation that we fulfill. And the first one is that pure business rules or decisioning application. A rules engine gives you a place to centralize business logic and expose that logic to business users to edit and maintain using graphical design tools instead of code. It gets the logic out of stored procedures, web pages, or custom code and puts it in a place where you can easily change it and maintain it without diving into the code at all. So it's enterprise class. You can run millions of transactions a day across thousands of rules in areas like medical claims processing, insurance underwriting, mortgage processing, things like that. The next case is what we call extend and expand, or how to get more out of what you have. It's really common when we work with customers, they already have some major out of the box projects that need to be part of their automation solution. And that could be those CRMs, those ERPs, databases, or other products that are built to handle a part of the process. Decisions are designed to integrate with these existing out-of-the-box solutions and then automate the special processes that those platforms don't do well. And some of them are listed here. Things like human-in-the-loop approval process. We have several ways to integrate with your existing landscape to help you get more out of the investments that you've made through several of the out-of-the-box integrations. But most importantly, we can talk to every modern software application with an open API. Taking the previous example a step further, we often act as an orchestration layer between different applications. So if you have several applications that have users and data in, you can use decisions as kind of a middleware to bring all the data in from one application, trigger an activity for a user in another application, and populate an outcome in yet another. Our most common use case is to act as that orchestration layer between various software applications or services, and then engage end users in workflows that cross those application boundaries. Thanks for listening to the salesy part of today's discussion. Nobody likes that part, but really, if any of that generated any interest or maybe a light bulb went off and you want to learn more about the Decisions platform outside of just process mining, which we're going to dive into today, the best way to do that is to reach out to us at sales@decisions.com. Or just pop a message into the chat. We'd be happy to set up a demo for you with one of our great engineers like Mark. How are you doing today, Mark?
Fabulous. Thanks, Danny.
It's great to be with you, man. I love the process mining functionality of the Decisions platform, as you know, because the platform is really ideal for automating and orchestrating business processes using all the different parts of your tech stack. Taking a look at our entire intelligence process automation platform, or IPA for short, I have a nice little visual here to help break down the different pieces. The platform enables you to address your automation priorities by fixing, your customer experience or modernizing legacy systems, automate anything in your business, everything in your business. It empowers us to analyze, automate, and execute, and elevate all those processes, to quickly design them, build them, deliver them, etc. Right? Let's start digging in with the business optimization part of that story, right? I want to take a second to define what process automation is so we can compare it to process mining. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
So the Decisions team, you're familiar with process automation uses technology to automate complex business processes. It typically has three functions: automating processes, centralizing information, and reducing the requirement for human input. It's designed to remove bottlenecks, reduce errors, loss of data, and all while increasing transparency, communication across departments, speed of processing. The rules engine allows you to centralize your business logic. The workflow manager allows you to sequence manual interactions and automate events into streamlined, transparent processes. And then lastly, the UI tool allows you to surface all that data and all those actions in meaningful ways, right? And then process mining, on the other hand, applies data science to discover, validate, and improve workflows by combining data mining and process analytics. Organizations can mine log data from their information systems to understand the performance of their processes, revealing bottlenecks and other areas of improvement. Process mining leverages a data-driven approach to process optimization and allows users to remain objective in their decision-making around resource allocation for existing processes. And then process discovery allows you to see your processes for what they are, uh, not what the often incorrect version of what we imagine them to be, right? When we lay out a process or we build an application, we have it in our minds, this crystal path that the user goes down, the ideal path, and that's rarely the case. And process mining helps us uncover those things. Let's talk a little bit about this great graphic, Mark. Why don't you explain what we're trying to get across here? I love this one.
Thanks, Danny, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody out there. Nice to present to you all today. So why do we need process mining, Danny? So process mining really gives us the benefit of identifying the real versus the ideal. And it really shows us the gap between the two. This, I know, is a ridiculously looking slide. It's got a couple of hamburgers on it. But if anyone's been to a fast food restaurant or seen an advertisement on TV, you typically expect what you see coming through the fast food line, seeing the picture of that hamburger or seeing that picture on TV. But the hamburger on the right is typically what you get, but actually what you're getting. I'm just showing this slide just as a quick visual because it's really the gap between the ideal and the real, and that is why we need process mining.
I literally just ate the real.
Very appetizing. Thank you for that. We're showing a little tidbit about process mining here. It's a couple of screenshots, but what you're seeing here is an order fulfillment process. And on the left-hand side, similar to that ideal looking hamburger, is a process that we think is very straightforward, but very linear, very serialized, if you will. Everything happens in one state, one series of states. Again, it's very straightforward. I don't see any bottlenecks, and I'll show you what I mean when we dig into the tool, but it's very easy to understand, right? Would you agree, Danny, on the left-hand side, pretty vanilla?
It looks, like a really linear process with defined steps and pretty much one path for success, right?
Absolutely. However, when we start exposing and digging into all of these activities and states and events, the diagram on the right, this was actually generated through our process mining exercises. And you can notice there are some differences, right? Pretty big differences.
For sure. Yeah.
And we're going to go into these differences, but we can see that there's new activities, new states, new events, more steps, if you will, in the process. We can actually see circular behavior where things can move between states and loop around. But this is really the difference between the same two processes. And one process is what we think is the ideal. The process on the right is really what's happening. And this is explaining in a nice visual graphic the gap between the two.
This would keep me up at night thinking about that.
I'm sure it keeps a lot of folks up at night.
Right, especially if you think what you know, right? You get comfortable in that nice straight line process, but knowing that this could be lurking out there.
Right. Some folks say that it's the tip of the iceberg.
Right? The tip of the iceberg. So how did we get to all of this variable, all this variation? How are we able to build that?
Sure. So, a lot of folks want to know how do I get my data in there? How do I see my process? How do I understand what the gaps are, where these bottlenecks, how they present themselves? So if we just step back a second, and if we think about digital systems have digital processes and they leave a digital footprint. Right. Really, if we have an event-driven process, if we have activity logs, we really only need 3 pieces of data, Danny. We just need a unique case ID, just generically saying case ID. we need an activity, and then we need a time date stamp for the activity, whether that time was the start time or the complete time of that activity. And we'll talk about it in a moment, but this is just an example of an event log that was exported from one of those said digital systems. To further elaborate, if we move on to the next slide, Danny, to further elaborate, there are some must-have data elements that we just mentioned, that case ID, activity, and then one time date stamp. However, I am going to show you a process that has some of these nice to haves. They have other event attributes, other case attributes, and resources. And what I mean by case attributes, anything that we collect data, we collect about the case. So for instance, we're going to talk a little bit about mortgages today. Some of those different case attributes might be the loan purpose type. It might be the type of property that we're mortgaging. It might be the United State, Texas, Florida, Georgia, where those mortgages originated from. And so we'll take a dive into those case attributes. We'll look at activities. But the more data we have, the more value we'll get out of our process mining exercises.
Probably the better the insights, right? So we really need very little to get started, but the richer the data that we provide to the tool, the deeper the insights that we'll see.
Correct.
I love it.
Okay. And so unlike traditional automation, process mining is really less about gathering the data than it is about the analysis. And the goal of process mining is really, like you just mentioned, Danny, is to give you the insight into the data to handle the big data analysis operations, give you tangible information, true information, real information, and avoid the need to do any manual data gathering. Okay, and we'll talk about the difference between automating this in a traditional way in a couple slides from now. But just looking at who gets involved, who does what in a process mining tool, in a process mining exercise, we can see a couple of personas here where IT, they're primarily going to be aiding getting that data. The business analysts typically are the primary user of a tool that we're about to showcase. And the business owner, they're able to take that data from that business analyst, quantify it, and then propose solutions or plans to improve that process. And then, of course, we have executive leadership. These folks are receiving all of this information, and they're tactfully driving revenues up and reducing risk, essentially getting the full benefit of reviewing all of these changes and a nice return on their investment.
Next.
So this is one of, oh, go ahead.
I want to set this slide up for you. So I think about like the traditional approaches of process optimization. And I'm always so thrilled to tell people what you used to do for your old job. Tell them what you used to do, Mark.
Absolutely. So and I hate to say a couple decades, but for close to 20 years, spent my life with a clipboard, piece of paper, a pen, and a stopwatch. And we used to go around and do consulting work, but traditionally doing workflow analysis, time and motion studies, gap analysis, and using this traditional approach on the left-hand side. What happened in this type of approach is because it's very manual, you would go out and understand a process, map it out on a whiteboard, and typically have conversation, interviews with stakeholders of a process, task owners of a process, and collect data. Ask folks, how long should the process take? How long should the task take? Why are you keying information where you're keying it in? What happens to that information when you complete your task? Who picks up the next task? All of these questions are flushing out all the things that we can do in an automated way today. The advantage to that is the pushback of data. So in the traditional approach, the one on the left-hand side, you would really have to convince folks that the data is accurate because what would happen is if we asked Danny, hey Danny, how long does it take you to do your task? You might come back and say 5 minutes. But if I ask you tomorrow, or if someone else asked you that same question, you might give a different response. And so it wasn't very consistent data. One task owner might give you different data than a task owner. They might be doing the same type of work, and you would get very disparate information. With process mining, no pushback on that data. It is accurate. It is real. And thus, this process mining tool really enables us to drive efficiencies, productivity, and return on investment.
If you had this 20 years ago, you probably would be a zillionaire.
If I had this 20 years ago, yeah.
We probably wouldn't be talking right now. You'd
Probably
be like
not.
living on an island. Yeah.
Correct.
I love it. Oh, hey, here's our integration layer.
Integration. So we are decisions, and we have process mining. With decisions, we can integrate with virtually anything that has an open endpoint using a RESTful API, an open database connection. Because we can orchestrate data, we can connect to any digital system, any activity or event-driven system, and bring it into process mining the correct way.
Oh, sorry, my mouse went dead.
It's okay.
There we go.
So let's just look at some of the common processes you can mine. And these are some of the common ones that I have come up with, ones that I have engaged in. I'm sure these look familiar. A lot of them are back office type of processes, but some of them are front office as well. But, the digital footprint that we've been talking about, there's always got to be some statefulness there. And oftentimes for some of our customers, decisions can be used to build both stateful as well as stateless processes. But if you're building decision workflows and those flows are consuming web requests, running rules, responding with results, that's something that you could mine today. If we configure process mining to connect natively to your system, we can collect real-time log data and look at real-time events happening so we can make decisions quickly. You can certainly use this tool for a lot of different aspects. We can look at process improvement. We can look at performance improvement. We can also look at cases that are violating the hamburger slide. And why I say that is we can look for cases that are violating our ideal process. We can identify what's really happening and then look for those violations. We're always trying to drive down risk. That's one of the areas where process mining comes in, and improve efficiencies, and obviously have that return on investment by driving revenues up and costs down. We're going to touch on some of these process mining methods or activities today. We are going to look at process discovery. We're going to look at some performance analysis as it relates to resources. We're going to look at variations of a process. Going back to that hamburger slide again, there's an ideal process, but there always seems to be variations of that ideal process. There could be 10 variations or 1,000 variations in your process. We can quickly identify those. Sometimes they're by design, and sometimes they're humans in the loop causing issues. So we can identify all of those, and we'll hop into the tool and show you that.
Right on, man. Let's talk about the use case that we're going to use to kind of take a look at the tool today. Let's and it's one that we can all commiserate with. It's probably like the worst process I've ever been through in my entire life was buying a house. Sorry, there we go.
There you go. So this is a typical, this is just a typical mortgage process. Today we're going to talk about a real life use case. This is a customer of ours, and they have a very straightforward mortgage process, very linear, very serialized. What you can see are some decision-making points. whether
Mhm.
or not we needed an appraisal based off the type of loan, if it's a FHA or VA type loan. We can also see in here their ideal process has some activities happening asynchronously, parallel at the same time. And we're going to expose if what was really happening was meeting the ideal process. And as we jump into the tool.
All right, cool, man. Let me stop sharing so you can actually show us
Sure.
the good stuff.
Absolutely. Process mining tool. These dashboards, the interface, very user friendly, very intuitive, very high adoption rate here. You don't have to have a Six Sigma sense about you. You don't have to be a data scientist. Maybe have a little bit of business analyst swagger about you. But we are providing all of the tools at a very easily usable uh, factor here. So what we're landed on inside of our process mining tool is our analyzer. I call it the visual process analyzer. What we're looking at, just to kind of set the stage for us, is we're actually looking at a real process, historical data feed. So what we've done here is taken an event log that had 1,000 cases provided by one of our customers, and this was in their line of business system. They were using an old antiquated system, a lot of manual processes happening here, and I'll describe what that means. But again, if you look up here, we're only looking at 1,000 cases. I call this the visual process analyzer because of the colors, the shapes, the signals that it's showing us and where we need to draw our attention. We can see we have a process map here. This process map was automatically generated as soon as we imported an event log. Okay. All of these activities that we see have a color code to them. Some are dark blue, some are light blue. The darker the blue, the more activity execution. The lighter the blue, almost white, the less activity executions. What I think is important is the colors, meaning the colors of the diamond. What you see in the value of the diamond here is the average duration of an activity, taking into account all of the resources that play. But what we can see is very similar to a traffic signal. We can see an orange, a yellow, and a red. Not to say that those are problems, but the tool quickly can identify the activities or the events that are taking the longest in our process. So if I opened up the screen the first time, Danny, and now that you have that information, can you quickly identify what activity is taking
If
the
my
longest?
Yeah, if my eyes were better, but it looks like communicate final approval. I'm old. Give me a break.
Absolutely. So yes, very quickly we can identify that this activity is taking
Yeah.
a long time. But if I double click on this activity, we can actually identify the resources that play a role here, Greg and Ricky. And on top, we can see that we can see the distribution of the duration of how long this activity takes. If we had a prescribed SLA, we could actually fine tune the SLA here. Maybe it's a 2-hour SLA, and we can see how that calculates against the duration. What's interesting about this, as we started to uncover and peel back the curtain a little bit on this particular activity that Danny identified, it was taking the longest in the process, and it was an issue, meaning that we had two sales managers, Greg and Ricky, who have always done this activity the same way over time, meaning for the past 20 years, when they were trying to communicate this final approval, they were doing it manually. And when I say manually, they were doing it with paper. And so they were printing a piece of paper, they were signing it, they were scanning it, they were emailing it, and then waiting for counter signature. All in all, on average, it was taking 4 hours for that activity to happen. So very quickly, we decided that we should focus our automation plans with this activity, just because it's a quick win. I always say it's the short pole in intent, that easy one to stand up. And so we we started talking about this one activity and how we can maybe remove some resources from this activity and start automating this process with some DocuSign, right? Let's have decisions send out the final approval and have DocuSign be the mediator or the integration piece there, and eliminate that manual process. Let's talk about the handovers real quick. When I say handovers, those are the gaps, those are the waiting times in this process. And these handovers are thick and thin in nature. These lines here between these activities, thick and thin in nature. They're also color coded. They're green and red. If I was to look for a thick line, maybe one that's red. Red is identified as a bottleneck, a slowness, if you will. Here, Danny, is a gap in this process. Again, the value on top is how many times did this handover execute? It executed 390 times. But the value on the bottom, again, is that average duration. 3.5 weeks. A case, a mortgage, was sitting idle, waiting for these folks over here who perform this final approval activity to pick it up. What's interesting...
Mine was at least that long.
Yeah. What's interesting here is that this activity that precedes this waiting time only takes 20 minutes. So why were these cases sitting here? We can double click on that handover and see who's responsible. Harry and Josh are the two responsible for allowing these cases to sit there waiting, as you, Danny, the consumer, just waiting for your mortgage to get approved.
Come on, guys.
These folks, just to kind of sum up things here, Danny, these folks have a 2-month SLA. I'm going to show you that. Going back to the whole process here, these folks have a 2-month SLA. That is their prescribed SLA. This process, these 1,000 historical cases, we're meeting this SLA about 65% of the time. Okay. The other things that we identified was at a resource level. We recognized that there was 10 resources that participated in these 1,000 cases, but what we can see here is some social networking. We can see where groups or teams of people have kind of socialized and they're working together, good, bad, or indifferent. Don't know yet, but I can see Greg and Ricky, again, are in red as it relates to this diamond. They're the slowest resources in this entire process. They're different social networks here, but again, let's see what they do. So if we double click on Ricky, I can see that Ricky is responsible for that one activity, communicate final approval. My hunch is that Greg is as well. And so we can quickly identify also on a role level, my hunch here that Greg and Ricky are those sales managers. So we can see 5 roles here. Sales manager. I went full circle on you, Danny, but just kind of giving the breadth of what we're doing here.
Lazy sales managers.
Man. So we took this in the next step, if you will. So we quickly identified this activity. We fixed that activity, and I'll show you future state here in a moment. But we started to look at other things, and we can do other things, meaning we can start looking and inspecting data. So we can understand where we need to focus our attention. And what I mean by that is when I flip over to the dashboard perspective, we can see very quickly in these KPI tiles that we're looking at over here on the top right, top right. We can see there's 27 case variants just in these 1,000 cases. That's a lot.
20, yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's a lot. Okay. We can see activity executions. We can see minimum case duration. We can see maximum case. So a lot of time-based values here. What I think is important to understand, though, is cyclical data. We like to look at cyclical data to see if we're underperforming or overperforming when we have a peak or a valley, right? And here we can quickly see how many cases we have in flight at even any given period of time. But this is perhaps where I start use filters. So filters plays a big role in process mining, meaning that if I wanted to filter in a particular period of time, we can do that. And I'll show you what I mean by filters in a second. We can quickly identify those 10 resources I showed you that in that other perspective in the visual analyzer. But now we can see, for instance, Will on the bottom here. Will is fast at one activity. He's very slow at another activity. And then we can do a comparison. We can see very quickly that he's excelling in this activity. His executions of that activity are much greater than this activity, which he's not doing so well on. And we can actually get the data set out of here if we want to inspect the data about Will and his activity execution.
Gotcha.
We
I
can
love a good heat map.
The heat map's great.
I love
And
it.
again, visually, Danny, because my eyes always go to what color. And so
Exactly.
I can quickly identify
Exactly.
the two resources here
Mhm.
that are causing issue in this process, Greg and Ricky.
Well,
right?
glad my name isn't on here.
Your name is not on here. We can also look at activity performers. So we have 14 different activities here, and I can quickly see who's fast and who's slow at what activity. We can do a comparison of all these activities. And so we have a breadth of charts, graphs, visuals. Some folks like, depending on your role in life, some folks are visual, some folks are data. So if we need to look at tabular data, we can. If we need to look at pie charts, bar charts, line graphs, we have all that capability as well. One of the things that we did,
and you can export all of them into your reports, which for me is always critical.
100%, of course, for any executive briefings or any review of the data. What's also something we did on this exploration is look at other case attributes, like how many of these loans were coming in, how many of these mortgages were coming in from self-employed consumers. We can see that 90% of these cases were folks that were not self-employed. We can see the property type very quickly. See, single family home is the majority, where we have government, two to four family condos, manufactured homes. What these folks were actually interested in was, because they're organized in a fashion by geography, where they have a mid-Atlantic group, they have a southeast group, mountain group. What they were interested in is seeing where these loans originated from. And we can quickly see here that we have loans originating from Ohio, Texas, Florida, Georgia, all the way down to Idaho. But we can see the distribution here. So we can see primarily, these 3-4 states are getting the bulk of the action. And then they were very interested in what type of residence. They're trying to build out this beyond the primary resident skew, if you will, and add additional lines. And so they're trying to ramp up their investment property type of mortgages and their second home mortgages, but they had originally marketed themselves as primary new home mortgages. And so through these attributes, we can identify different aspects of the case. This is perhaps where we would start using filters. And I'm just going to show you filters real quick. As we go up to the top right, we have a lot of filters we can look at. So for instance, if we wanted to look at all of the loans with a specific type, because we wanted to mine just the refinance loans or just the new home purchase loans, we can start refining using filters and specifically look at specific cases. So we can quickly see here that if I apply this filter, we're going to see 384 cases. But what I also want to do is add a time-based filter, because I want to see how our process is performing at a particular peak or valley of time. A lot of times we think that because we have a lot of cases, a high volume of cases, our performance goes down. But that's just a hypothetical, right? Hey, we got a bulk of cases came in, and we want to make sure we're performing at the top level. We can absolutely do that with a time-based filter as well. So we've done a filter, a couple different ones, a time-based filter, and we're only looking at refinance homes. And now we can see we're only looking at those 57 cases that meet that criteria. Everything else that we look at would hold on to those. Those filters they persist throughout. And so now if we look at loan purpose type, we're only looking at those home purchases here, new home purchases. so on and so forth. So what they wanted to see, so this is a change now, right? So we're seeing that most of these new home purchases are coming out of Texas, Connecticut. Okay. So that's just one way to use filters, just as an example. And if you don't mind, Danny, I'm going to wipe those filters clean.
Cool.
The other thing they wanted to look at was how much did this process cost them doing it their way without automation. And so that's something that we took a look at. Just for the sake of the resources on the right-hand side, I took the liberty and put $20 in for everybody just to give you an idea, a taste of how we can calculate total cost of a process. So this process, using the 1,000 cases, it cost the enterprise, cost the company almost $200,000. But we can break out the cheapest activity, the most expensive activity, our cheapest resource, and our most expensive resource. Things that we use this for, we might want to identify the most expensive activity because that is driving our cost up, and focus on this red one, right? Communicate final approval. It is costing the operation, costing this process more money than any other activity. And this takes into account the cost per hour of the employee, how often they execute this said activity here, and how long it takes them on average to complete their task. And this is how we calculate the $83.56 for this one particular activity. We can also use this for simulation. So if we think that Sarah, Will, Mary are up for some merit increase, they're up for a pay raise of some sort, we can quickly identify how that'll affect our operation, our process in regards to dollars and cents. Meaning that if I compute these new costs, you can see how things have changed in these KPI tiles. So we can actively track the cost of the process as we collect real-time data. The other things that we wanted to take a look at in this particular process mining consultation was variations in the process. The most popular variation is the one here on top. Okay, it meets about 20% of the cases. And this is an area of opportunity that we quickly identified, where 20% of these cases we're going through only 2 events or 2 activities. And we can quickly see that this activity, the tool again identifies this as the slowest activity in this 2-step process, but it was taking 18 minutes for folks, Danny, you as a consumer, to receive a conditional offer. As a technology person, I'm not waiting 20 minutes. No. I'm going to go to 10 other websites, fill out a form. It took folks here actually 14 minutes to fill out their web form, but it took 20 minutes to get a conditional offer back. And as we talk to the folks that partake in this particular activity, the task owners here, this was manual. They were going to another third-party system, doing a credit check. They were doing some sort of geographic check. They were doing a background check. They were doing all the due diligence that a rules engine could do in a scorecard or a knockout procedure using our tool. And so they were losing 20% of their business because a consumer did not want to wait almost 20 minutes for their conditional offer. This was something that long. Heck no.
No.
So this is something that we are automating, and I'll show you a future state in a second. But my point here is that this Variant Explorer exposed this piece here. Whereas we jump to the next variant, the second most popular variant. Again, if you remember, Danny, we go back to that ideal process, the model from the slide deck.
Yeah.
This looks very similar to the model, except we don't have those 2 activities happening in parallel. They're actually happening in serial, one after the other. And we can also see that we're missing some activities. I no longer have 14 activities here. Now, if we needed to inspect this data and go, well, 180 cases went through this particular variant, my hope, because we're missing some of these steps, i.e. we're missing appraisal type steps, my hope when I look at the data is that appraisals were not necessary. But as we started to inspect the data, we can see that this is a refinance loan. As I move over, we can see it's a primary residence. This one is a VA loan. That's a good thing. But we can certainly look and inspect the data. This happens to be a conventional loan. It skipped an appraisal process. That is a violation, and it should have got flagged, and someone should have been alerted, which we can do with this tool as well. Danny, I'm going to jump real quick. So I'm going to jump to the end result of fixing those two activities. Again, we quickly identified this communicate final approval as a problem, and we quickly identified that conditional offer extended, which was taking 18 minutes, was a problem. We can also, just to review, that this was a 2-month SLA, and we're meeting that 65% of the time, just to kind of give a review. I'm going to flip over to their active process mining. And what we're doing here is I asked this customer for their last week of cases after it went through their automation process inside of our decisions automation tool.
Okay.
Everything is the same as it relates to the 14 activities. However, you can quickly identify those two activities. Communicate final approval is no longer 4 hours. It's 12 minutes. And their conditional offer extended, no longer 18 minutes, actually went down to 16 seconds. Now, if we just inspect this one activity, we can look at it. Oh, look at that. So 94% of the time, we're automating this conditional offer extended with scorecards and knockout rules using our rules engine. However, sales is still getting involved because there's certain demographic perhaps that needs, some special attention. They need a phone call. They need an email. They don't, they're not tech savvy, if you will. So that was a big win here. The other thing that we did, like I mentioned before, communicate final approval, we've also automated that step and added that DocuSign integration in our decisions automation platform. And so about 75% of the time, this final approval is going out via DocuSign. And here it says sales. Sales is now participating in this activity. No longer sales managers, sales. Okay. Because we've made this huge change and went to automation, we actually eliminated resources. And I'm hiding the resources name because if I have someone on this webinar who's familiar with this company, they wanted to hide that. But if I kind of swing the gates open and show you the resources, again, I'm hiding the names because I didn't want to show the names, just to protect the innocent.
The innocent.
Yes, sir. But here you can see we've eliminated a resource. We eliminated a role. We eliminated the sales manager role altogether. They were actually one of the highest paid resources in this process. They were also causing a huge gap because they've always done it the same way in that manual process. And we added decisions as a role here. Okay. After we've made all these automation changes and improved this process, we've quickly identified that now the clerk, where there's only one clerk now and not two, is taking a long time because they push a lot of paper around and have to be in the system a lot. And so now another area of opportunity is to work on the clerk role and the clerk participating in a bunch of activities, meaning they're participating in asset review, appraisal orders, and things of that nature. So now we're focusing on those activities and extending the use case inside of decisions. The other things that we wanted to look at, and I mentioned it before on the dashboard, is, we can still go in and we can still look at loan purpose types, and everything here is going to be very similar, but they didn't want all the data in one place. They wanted to parse that data out. Like I mentioned before, we had geographical units. One of those geographical units, as an example, was a mid-Atlantic unit. And so what they wanted to see was they wanted to see high-level KPIs about the cost of the process, this new process, just pertaining to mid-Atlantic originating mortgages. Okay. They wanted to see the distribution of those states. So you can see New Jersey, Connecticut, Georgia. I don't know how they define mid-Atlantic, but that's okay. For Virginia, Pennsylvania, as we hover over this pie chart, we can see the time value. So I can see very quickly loans that are originating in New Jersey are only taking a little over a month, where in Connecticut, they take about four weeks. So we can see the time-based values. All of these charts, graphs that have been customized for this particular persona, some vice president, can all be adjusted. So we can create custom dashboards. Like for instance, property type in the mid-Atlantic or mortgage durations by state. Okay. Here down here, they can change this how they want. Right now I had it flagged, and I'll show you what the difference. I had this flagged as resources. I'll put it back in activity. And it's going to flip my, and so they wanted to see the process here, but really what they were after, they like to see the animation behind the process because they want to see live cases coming through this process, which they can certainly see real-time live cases flowing through the process. And so
I love that part.
If you were to step into this vice president's office, this actually is on a huge screen, just sitting there like a control board. They want to see their cases coming through on a real-time basis. And then as they sit and watch this all day, they see these charts. They see these charts, graphs, and KPIs update constantly throughout the day, week, month. And that was what they were after. So with that, we'll also be able to see that we only have our 5 resources. And what's interesting about this, even though we've accelerated the process and we no longer have a 2-month or hitting that SLA of 2 months at 65%, we're actually hitting that. We're hitting that upwards to 90% at this point, with really eliminating half of the staff.
Right.
Okay. But what we've noticed is we have an issue with this order of the appraisal order status. Really, the average cost is astronomical. And so it's another area of opportunity. Again, we're in the midst of discussing how to automate this, what the business logic needs to look like. And hopefully we can get to a point where we either eliminate this activity and having humans in the loop and trying to fully automate that. So I'd be excited to show you this again in the next iteration of automation. What you will notice, just to kind of complete the loop here, is on our Variant Explorer, we still have 17 variations of this process, even though it's semi-automated, but we're not losing that 20% of the business anymore. Our most popular variant is this guy here. And so what I've essentially done in the last 30, 35 minutes is show you an old process, show you a new process, and showed you the difference between not automating and automating the process.
I love it. I love it. You know, it's really a powerful way to, from a business perspective, the ability to associate different data elements with an activity, right? Costs and labor resources and time, to be able to use a process mining tool to analyze processes end to end, to be able to, one, really realize the cost of inefficiency to the business, right? To be able to put a number to that is half the battle, right? In automation and figuring out where we're going to automate things, where we're, where it makes sense to stop the bleeding first. But also to be able to predict the ROI gained from optimizing those processes. That's really strong stuff, man. Great job today.
Thank you, sir. I don't know if we have time for Q&A, but I'll stop.
I think we've got a couple of minutes here. It looks like Paul had a question. Do any of the customers have the bot associated with a rate that allows for the cost amortization and the development and the maintenance cost of the bots? Wow, that is kind of deep, Paul. I will say that so far as figuring out the amortization, we have lots of different ways of doing that, especially leveraging our rules engine. The decisions rules engine is great for exactly that specific purpose. So much as the cost and development and maintenance of the bots, it's really kind of dependent upon your organization. But building them and running them and orchestrating them in decisions is a snap, and it's visual, and it doesn't require any code, and it doesn't require an army of software engineers to do, right? The whole magic behind the decisions platform is empowering people, business users, with the tools to build enterprise class software, leveraging their domain expertise of your business, not so much their domain expertise of Python or whatever, development language you want to insert here. So I hope that was helpful to everyone. Thank you so much for joining in today. Mark, thanks so much, man. It's really
Thanks,
informative.
Danny.
I love process mining. Before we go, I'm going to just make a couple more quick plugs, everybody. If you found this interesting, the best thing to do, reach out to us at sales@decisions.com. If you'd like to learn more about the platform and how it can help automate things in your business, you can spend some time with a great guy like Mark or one of our other sales engineers. Check us out at decisions.com/event to register for our next webinar, which is the introduction of version 9 of the Decisions platform with Project Hub for optimized project management experience. And check out our live events. Thank you so much, everybody. Play us out, big man. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thanks, Danny. Thank you, everyone.